She looked right at me and giggled, that teenage kind of giggle that makes you feel like the joke is on you. Then she said it. Mom thinks if you disappeared no one would even notice. Just like that. Sitting across from me in the dining room, wearing the gold bracelet I gave her last month for her birthday. Her voice was light, playful, even like she didn't understand what she was really saying. But I did. The room went quiet for a second. Then my sister let out this little laugh, followed by a few chuckles around the Easter table. Someone even repeated it like it was funny. If you disappeared no one would even notice. I sat there holding my fork, staring at my plate. I didn't say a word. I didn't cry. I just nodded slowly and looked down at the bracelet glinting on her wrist as she reached for another dinner roll. In that exact moment something inside me changed. A cold stillness settled in my chest. I smiled, but not because anything was funny. I knew then and there. These people didn't see me. Not really. And for the first time in years I felt ready to let them. For as long as I could remember I was always the one everyone turned to. My sister, who's my only family, would always say she was too busy with work, or that she didn't know how to handle the stress of raising her daughter alone. And every time I was there, whether she needed help with the bills or someone to pick up her daughter from school, it didn't matter. It was just expected of me and I always said yes. I don't think my sister ever really saw the strain it put on me. It wasn't just the financial support. I was always there emotionally too. Every time she had a bad day at work she'd call me. Every time her daughter acted up I was the one who'd step in, trying to calm her down to make sure things didn't spiral. It was always me. I took on so much responsibility because I wanted to help. I didn't mind doing it, at least I told myself I didn't. But the truth is it wore me down. Raising my niece, Emma, felt like raising my own child sometimes. I spent weekends with her, taking her to the park, helping her with school projects and even teaching her how to ride a bike. I'd always buy her the things she wanted just to see the smile on her face. I'd pay for her extracurricular activities, for new clothes, for things that her mother couldn't afford at the time. I did it without a second thought, thinking I was helping. I thought maybe if I did enough, maybe I could give her the life I never had growing up. And my sister? Well, she didn't seem to notice how much I was doing. She'd say, "You're so great with Emma," but that was about it. I'd remind her how much I helped and she'd say, I know, like it was just another part of her routine. She never seemed grateful. She'd ask me to do more, as though I was some kind of unpaid nanny, but there was never any acknowledgement of the sacrifices I was making. I didn't mind though. I loved Emma. She was a bright kid with a lot of potential, and I wanted to make sure she had a good future, even if her mom couldn't give her everything. It made me feel needed even if no one truly appreciated it. I gave them my time, my money, and my heart. I did all of this because I thought it was what family was supposed to do. But somewhere along the way I started to realize that maybe I was the only one giving. I was giving everything I had and no one was giving back. I kept telling myself that this was just a phase, that things would get better. But deep down I knew I was doing all this without ever really being seen. I thought maybe, just maybe, one day they'd realize what I'd done for them. But that day, it never came. And what happened at that dinner table? Well, it was the final nail in the coffin. It was Easter Sunday and as usual I was the one putting everything together. My sister and her family had invited a few relatives over, and the house was buzzing with conversation and the smell of my famous roasted lamb. I had spent hours in the kitchen the night before making sure everything was perfect. The mashed potatoes had just the right amount of cream, the glazed carrots were tender but still crisp, and the lamb, well, the lamb was always the highlight. I'd bought Emma a new dress for the occasion. It was a soft, pale pink with delicate lace around the neckline. I knew she'd love it. I'd even splurged a little, buying her a pair of matching shoes and a headband with a bow. She looked adorable, and when I saw her face light up as she twirled in front of the mirror, I couldn't help but feel a small pang of pride. This was the kind of thing I'd always wanted to do for her, give her the things that would make her happy, even if it meant I had to go without a few luxuries myself. The dinner table was set, the food spread out like a feast, and everyone gathered around, chatting and laughing, filling the house with a warm, comforting noise. My sister, of course, was preoccupied with her own conversation, but that didn't surprise me. She often was. She was catching up with Aunt Linda about some project at work, barely glancing at me as I set down the last dish. As the meal began, I found myself doing what I always did, making sure everyone was comfortable. Refilling drinks, carving the lamb, checking to see if anyone needed seconds. I was used to playing the role of the quiet, responsible one, The one who always made sure everyone else was taken care of. I didn't mind though. It felt good to be needed. But that's when it happened. After a few rounds of, "How's work going?" and "When are you getting married?" the conversation shifted to Emma. She had just finished her dinner and the adults around the table were admiring her new dress. "You look so grown up in that dress, sweetheart," Aunt Linda said, smiling warmly at her. Emma smiled back, but there was something different about her smile. Something mischievous. She giggled, twirling around in the dress, clearly enjoying the attention. "I know, right? And Sarah bought it for me. She's the best. She always buys me the best things." It wasn't the words themselves that made my heart sink. It was the way she said them, like she didn't even realize how much I did for her. Or maybe it was that she did know and she didn't care. My sister chimed in. "You know, Emma, your Aunt Sarah has always been there for you. She's done so much, hasn't she?" But then Emma giggled again, looking over at me with a smirk that I can't quite explain. "Yeah, but Mom says, if you disappeared tomorrow no one would even notice." I froze. The room seemed to freeze with me. For a split second there was dead silence. I couldn't even look at anyone. I just stared at my plate, trying to keep my hands from shaking. Then, almost as if on cue, everyone else at the table laughed. Some chuckled lightly while others, like Aunt Linda, let out a full belly laugh. My sister's laugh was the loudest, followed by a soft, "Oh, Emma, you're so funny." It was like I wasn't even there. I didn't know what to do. I didn't want to make a scene. I wasn't the kind of person who raised their voice, especially not at family dinners. So I stayed quiet. I just nodded as if I agreed with them. But deep down something in me snapped. The laughter kept going and I just kept smiling. The kind of smile you put on when you're hurting but you don't want anyone to see. But inside I was seething. I was furious at Emma for saying it, furious at my sister for laughing, furious at myself for letting it go on for so long. In that moment I realized something I had been blind to for years. I was invisible to them. I had given them everything, time, money, love, and all I was a joke. The person they turned to when they needed something. But when I needed something, when I needed a little recognition, a little appreciation, nothing. I wasn't even worth noticing. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't yell. I just sat there holding my fork, feeling like the smallest person in the room. But something inside me was shifting. I was done being the invisible one. I was done being the one everyone took for granted. And before the night ended, things would change. It wasn't the big things that hurt the most. It was the little things, the quiet, ignored sacrifices I made every day. I didn't need a thank you or recognition, but sometimes it felt like they didn't even see me. And it started with the small things I told myself didn't matter. But after that dinner I saw them for what they were, an endless list of things I did just to keep the peace. It started with the rent. Every month my sister would call me, explaining how she couldn't make ends meet. She'd say, "Sarah, I'm short this month. Could you help out again?" Of course I'd say yes. I always said yes. I'd write the check for the rent, then transfer money for the utilities. I never questioned it. It wasn't even about whether I could afford it. It was just a given that I'd help. Sometimes I'd even pay for the groceries or pick up the extra items for the house. I would fix the car too. My sister's old sedan had been through a lot. I remember the first time it broke down in the middle of the street. She called me, frantic, asking if I could help. Please, I don't know who else to ask. I dropped everything to get her car towed to the mechanic. Every time something went wrong, I was the one who handled it. I'd pay for the repairs with the hope that she'd be able to repay me later. But somehow that later never came. Then there were the errands. The endless errands. Picking up Emma from school, taking her to after-school activities, buying supplies for her projects. I remember when Emma needed a last-minute costume for a school play. My sister was too busy at work, so I ran out and bought everything from the fabric to the face paint. It wasn't easy, but I did it with a smile because it was for Emma. That's all that mattered. And when it came to helping with school, I was always there. Every time Emma had a project, I helped her put it together. I'd sit with her, making sure she understood what she was doing, patiently explaining things over and over. When she struggled with her math homework, I'd sit for hours making sure she got it right. I always felt like I was giving her a little piece of the life I never had. Someone who cared enough to teach her, to help her become something more. But all of it was done without anyone ever noticing. They never saw the sacrifices I made. They never saw how I quietly gave up my own time, my own happiness just to help them. I was always the one left out of family photos because I was the one behind the camera. I was the one who was never invited to special events unless they needed something from me. But I kept quiet. I stayed in the background doing what I thought was expected of me. Every birthday, every holiday I was there helping, cleaning and never asking for anything in return. Till now. That night at the dinner table when Emma made that comment and everyone laughed, it was like a switch flipped in my mind. I realized that all these years of giving, of quietly sacrificing, had been taken for granted. I'd been invisible, always present but never seen. And I couldn't do it anymore. I had been the one to carry everyone, financially, emotionally, physically, while they lived their lives. But now I was done. I wasn't going to stay silent anymore. Not this time. Not after everything I had done for them. I didn't rush into anything. There was no loud confrontation, no storming out with dramatic speeches. I had learned long ago that true power doesn't need to announce itself. So I took a deep breath and began planning my exit, carefully, quietly, and with a clarity I hadn't felt in years. First things first, I needed to take control of the finances. It had always been me paying the bills, covering the rent, covering anything that wasn't in their immediate reach. But now, I wasn't going to be anyone's safety net anymore. I logged into the joint accounts we had set up, ones where my name had been added under the pretense of just in case. I had always made sure there was enough to cover their expenses. But now I wasn't just managing it. I was unraveling it. With steady hands I started by canceling the automatic payments, the rent, the utilities, the streaming subscriptions that my niece spent hours on. Gone. I didn't give them a warning. I didn't send an email or make a phone call. I just took it all offline one by one. The silence in the room as I clicked confirm felt heavier than I could describe. Next came the more delicate part, the joint accounts. I had always been added to them because it was easier for my sister to manage things, but this time I was going to unpick it all. I knew the bank login details by heart as I'd often been the one to check the balance or move things around when they were in a tight spot. It was simple to remove my name from the accounts. No drama. Just a few clicks, a few confirmations and I was out. The money that had been tied to my name was no longer mine to manage. I wasn't going to risk a future where they could still lean on me financially. Then there was the apartment lease. I had helped them get into this place, paying the first few months in advance when they couldn't. But now I had my own future to think about. I reached out to the leasing office and quietly transferred the lease into their name. It was all business. No emotion. I told them I was moving out. I'd been there long enough helping them settle into this place, but it was time for me to move on. It wasn't easy. I had to make arrangements for some of the personal things I'd kept there. But by the time I was done, everything was in place for them to take over without a hitch. And then I thought about how I would leave. I couldn't just disappear without leaving something behind, a small trace of who I had been in their lives. Something they would have to look back on and feel the weight of what they had taken for granted. I didn't want to say anything that would make them feel like they had won. I wasn't angry, I wasn't that person anymore. But I wanted them to understand that they wouldn't get the chance to apologize or try to convince me to come back. I wanted to leave them with nothing but their own regrets. So, I sat at the kitchen table that evening, my hands still steady, and I wrote a short letter. No longer than a few sentences. I didn't need to justify my actions. I had nothing left to explain. The words were simple, direct, and final. I've done everything for you, everything. But I'm done. No more help. No more involvement. I'm walking away. You'll never see me again. I folded the letter and placed it carefully inside a small wooden box that had sat on their dining table for years. A box that had never been opened in all the time I'd been around. I thought it was fitting. I closed the lid and set it where they would find it when they came looking for me. There was no drama. No fight. Just a calm, clean break. As I left that night, I didn't feel anger or relief. I felt something much quieter. Satisfaction. They would never see me coming again. And when they realized I was gone, they wouldn't be able to fix it. They wouldn't be able to ask for more. I wasn't going to be their safety net anymore. I wasn't going to be anyone's backup. And as I walked out the door, I knew that this was the last time I'd ever be used. I wasn't going to make a scene. I wasn't going to beg for an apology. I had already walked away from the life they thought I'd always be there to fix. And that was the most freeing feeling of all. That night I moved through the apartment like a ghost. Quiet. Unseen. I didn't need anything. I didn't need to fight or scream or make a scene. I had already made my decision. I'd been quietly unraveling the ties that bound me to them for weeks, and now it was time to leave. The silence in the air was thick, but it wasn't uncomfortable. It was peaceful. It felt like a final exhale after holding my breath for far too long. I didn't pack much. A few clothes. A toothbrush. Things I could easily replace, things I had no attachment to. I folded my clothes with the same care I had always used when I was packing for one of the many trips I'd taken for them. But this time it wasn't for them. This time it was for me. The small duffel bag seemed too empty for the weight of the years I was leaving behind. I stopped for a moment, standing at the door, my hand resting on the knob. I looked back at the apartment, our apartment, I used to think. The place I had worked hard to help create for them. The place I'd made home, at least in my mind. But it wasn't mine anymore. It never had been. I set my keys down on the kitchen counter. No note. No explanation. Just the keys. My final act of letting go. I could hear the faint hum of the refrigerator in the kitchen, the soft ticking of the clock on the wall. But other than that, the apartment was silent. There was no one here to stop me. No one to beg me to stay. No one even noticed I was gone. I took a deep breath and turned the handle. The door clicked behind me with a finality that echoed through me, and I walked out into the cool night air, the city lights blinking in the distance. I didn't look back. I didn't have to. I had already made my peace. Walking away wasn't easy, it hurt. More than I thought it would. I had spent so many years quietly sacrificing, helping, giving everything to them, and now it was just over. But in that hurt there was also a kind of freedom. A kind of peace I had never known. I didn't need to explain. I didn't need their approval. I just needed to breathe. And in that moment I realized that I had already made the choice. Peace would be my only companion now. When they finally opened the wooden box the next morning, I imagined them thinking it was just another random keepsake. But inside was more than just sentimental trinkets. It was the end of everything I had silently endured. The kind of bombshell that couldn't be ignored no matter how hard they tried. The letter was the first thing they pulled out. It wasn't long. I didn't need to explain everything. I had already done that in the silence of my departure. But I couldn't leave without leaving the truth behind. I wrote the words calmly, without emotion, without anger. Just facts. I've been the one paying the rent. I've been the one fixing your car when you couldn't afford it. I've been the one covering your bills when you called me. I've been the one who quietly picked up the slack for years, letting you all take what I had to offer without ever giving anything back. The words felt sharp as they took form on the paper, each one a slice through the years of selflessness I had lived. But that wasn't all. Along with the letter were a stack of receipts, pages and pages of them. The rent payments I'd made when they couldn't afford it, the utility bills I'd covered when the bank account ran dry, the countless trips to the store to buy groceries when their money wasn't enough. I hadn't just paid for their lives. I had funded their comforts, their luxuries, their vacations. They thought I was just a steady hand in the background, a quiet presence always there when they needed me. But they never knew the cost. And then there was the final note. The one that would change everything. The one that I knew would hit hardest. All of these things, every payment I've made, every debt I've covered, are now officially in my name. The car loan. The apartment lease. The utilities. Everything. I've taken it all back. And you will no longer have access to any of it. You'll have to stand on your own now. I had made sure the bank had updated their records. I had already transferred the lease, canceled the subscriptions and closed the shared accounts. They were already on their own. The box wasn't just a goodbye. It was the weight of everything I had quietly carried for years, now laid out in black and white. The truth was cold. The facts were simple. I wasn't going to be there to pick up the pieces anymore. And though I'd left quietly, I knew that when they read what was inside that box, it would hit them harder than any confrontation ever could. I was done. 6 months have passed since I walked away. And in those 6 months, I've discovered a piece I didn't know I was missing. I live alone now in a small but cozy apartment. It's nothing extravagant, but it's mine. There's no noise in the background, no endless demands, no pretending to be happy while everything else falls apart. It's just me, quiet, content, and free. My finances are stable now. I'm finally seeing the fruits of my own hard work, the work I never had the chance to enjoy before. I've paid off my debts, built up savings, and even started investing. For the first time in years, I'm taking care of myself without guilt. No more draining myself to fill the holes in others' lives. I've learned the value of saying no. The calls from my sister started coming in around the third week after I left. At first I felt a slight pull, a mix of guilt and longing to make things right. But I reminded myself of what I had endured. I remembered the giggles, the sneers, the silent sacrifices. So I ignored them. I didn't return a single call. I didn't respond to a single text. Then came an email from my niece. I could tell she was trying to be genuine. Her words were careful, apologetic even. She said she realized what she had said, how wrong it was, how much I had done for them all. But I didn't open it. I didn't need to hear it. I had already made my choice, and I wasn't going to let their guilt trip me back into the same old cycle of giving and being taken for granted. I was done being invisible. I was done being the background character in my own life. I've learned to stand in the foreground now, taking up space. It's incredible how much better life is when you stop pouring yourself into people who only take and never give back. And now, every day feels like a new beginning. The past is behind me and I'm finally moving forward. I'm free. And that freedom is worth everything.